Hi there! It was brought to my attention that part of the official Discord community is in an uproar due to a misinterpretation of the conclusion of my Lewis review. Towards the end of the video, I explained that, according to ReTempest, a V0 Lewis does not outperform Sharkry in damage and also provides fewer Scorchmark stacks due to having fewer burn attacks. As a result, in order to replace Sharkry in a full monoburn lineup, Lewis would require additional investment. Due to the limited space available in the pros and cons sections, I summarized this point as, quote, needs at least V2. In hindsight, I can see how this shorthand may have been misleading. While I don't mind if you raised pitchforks in my direction, I'm concerned that some of my regular viewers may have come away with the impression that I was actively recommending pulling a V2 Lewis. To be clear, that was never my intention. Lewis is not dysfunctional at V0, nor do I consider her V2 by itself a particularly good stopping point. Sharkry is a strong character, and failing to outperform her does not make Lewis bad. At the same time, intermediate dupes for damage dealers tend to suffer from severe diminishing returns, which is why I generally advise against stopping halfway on DPS characters. Given that ReTempest does not currently place Lewis on the See and Burn team at all, my overall recommendation was one of caution rather than endorsement. That said, it is entirely fair to question the claim that a lower invested Lewis is not a worthwhile replacement for Sharkry. In the video, I was referencing ReTempest's analysis, however, he did not provide a direct comparison between the two dolls. To properly follow up on this point, I went ahead and ran the calculations myself. For this analysis, I first compared a 7-turn rotation against the training dummy using a V6 Sharkry with an R1 Planeta versus Lewis at 3 different investment levels. Both characters use max attachments, a level 60 remold pattern and triple stat keys purely for simplicity. The remold equipment includes only an attack bonus, again to keep the comparison straightforward, while slightly favoring Lewis due to her higher base attack. Damage bonuses from a V1 Vector and V5 QJ are also included to reflect a realistic team scenario, with the rotation assuming that all relevant soldier attacks and support actions are triggered. As you can see, at V0 with the Battle Pass weapon Mjolnir, Lewis's output is nearly identical to Sharkry's damage. The weapon's 15% bonus damage while stationary is assumed to be active starting from turn 2. Once again, this result does not imply that Lewis is weak, rather, it highlights just how strong Sharkry is. Despite being a 4-star, Sharkry compensates remarkably well for a lower base attack. When Lewis's signature weapon, Toysmith, is introduced, her damage increases by roughly 15%. At this point, however, you are effectively doubling your pull investment for relatively marginal gains. At V2R1, Lewis's damage exceeds Sharkry's by approximately 50%. For simplicity, I ignored the additional overburn triggers from Lewis's V1, which would increase her output slightly. The V2 to V0 damage gap is smaller than what ReTempest reported, though I don't know the assumptions for his calculations. To simulate a scenario that is more in line with Gunsmoke, I lowered the defense of the opponent from 5000 to 3000 and introduced a ramping damage buff starting from turn 2, 20% per turn. This is arbitrary of course, but many boss fights involve some combination of vulnerability and damage bonuses. Then, Lewis's advantage is a little smaller, as her kit is already quite saturated with damage bonuses. Anyone who's been around long enough should be familiar with these diminishing returns. While the exact magnitude of the difference will vary depending on the scenario, the broader takeaway should be clear. Replacing Sharkry with Lewis at V0 does not meaningfully improve performance. That said, Lewis is still perfectly capable and likely stronger than most other V0 DPS characters. If every element featured a 4-star of Sharkry's caliber, we would be having this exact discussion across the board. Ultimately, if you are lacking sufficient burn units, picking up a single copy of Lewis is a fine choice. I hope this clarifies my reasoning and that no one spent their hard-earned pulls based on a misunderstanding. Feel free to argue and disagree with me by leaving a comment or by messaging me directly on Discord. And with that, I'll carefully step out of pitchfork range for now, at least until the next banner. In any case, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.